The birth control pill is a method of contraception that many people in our society today are able to possess, distribute, and purchase freely. It hasn't always been this way, however. William Baird revolutionized the ability to possess birth control through his activism. His actions resulted in advancements in women's reproductive rights, change in views on family law in our society, allowed women to enter the workforce, and unmarried people's right to obtain contraceptives. In the Supreme Court case Eisenstadt versus Baird, an activist by the name of William Baird gave a lecture to students at Boston University about contraception on April 6, 1967. After the lecture, Baird invited the students to take contraceptives, specifically MCO, a vaginal spermicide. He was later arrested for violating a Massachusetts law that, quote, makes it a felony for anyone to give away a drug, medicine, instrument, or article for the prevention of conception except in the case of a registered physician administering or prescribing it for a married person, or an active registered pharmacist furnishing it to a married person presenting a registered physician's prescription. The case ruled that the Massachusetts law about contraception violated the fundamental human rights of unmarried couples granted by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Quote, the Massachusetts statute banning distribution of contraceptives to unmarried persons constitutes a prohibition on contraception per se, which violates the rights of single persons under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Associate Justice of the Supreme Court William J. Brennan states that if the right of privacy means anything, it is the right of the individual, married or single, to be free from unwarranted governmental intrusion into matters so fundamentally affecting a person as the decision whether to bear or beget a child. Thus, the case recognized that single people had the same right as married couples to procreate. The court said that the distinction between single and married individuals failed to achieve the rational basis test of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Overall, this case would result in a changed view of family law in society, unmarried people's right to obtain contraceptives, and a change of women's reproductive rights as well. Contraception has been around since 3000 BCE. People have used multiple materials to protect themselves, such as linen sheath, silk paper, and animal parts. In 1839, Charles Goodyear invented the first rubber vulcanization. However, the first rubber condom was not invented until 1855. The condom continued to advance up into the 1900s. The first latex condom was invented in 1920. Throughout most of the 19th century, it was legal for people to purchase and distribute contraception in the U.S. However, in the 1870s, a social purity movement evolved and aimed to outlaw vice, prostitution, and obscenity. In 1873, the Comstock Law was enacted, which was a federal law prohibiting mailing of any article or designed or intended for the prevention of conception or procuring of abortion, as well as any other information around contraception. This act restricted the contraception in hopes of returning to simpler times after the changes produced from the Civil War. The act stemmed from societal concerns surrounding premarital sex, abortion, women's roles, and the growing lower class. These societal ideals led to a stricter culture view of sex and sexual identity. In 1916, Margaret Sanger, one of the earliest contraceptive activists, opened the first Planned Parenthood clinic in Brooklyn, New York. 9 days after the clinic opened, Sanger was arrested and the clinic was shut down. This was only a small setback in her fight for women's reproductive rights and health. As part of her activism for birth control, she founded many organizations, such as the American Birth Control League and the National Committee on Federal Legislation for Birth Control. She founded many of these organizations to guarantee that women had the ability to access better health. Margaret Sanger has continued to be a pillar in the movement and is now frequently referred to as the founder of the modern birth control movement. In the late 1960s, the women's liberation movement emerged. This movement was a political alignment of women and feminist intellectualism. It created great political, intellectual, and cultural change in the Western world. Within this movement, women advocated for reproductive rights as well as the rights to make decisions for their own bodies. The sexual revolution was also occurring at this time. People were more exploratory, they were becoming more open to talking about sex and premarital sex. People were also exploring their sexual identity. Around this time, the birth control pill was invented and introduced to the public. By 1965, 1 out of every 4 married women in America under 45 had used the pill. From then on, the use of the pill steadily increased. By 1984, there were around 50 to 80 million women using the pill. Women were now able to invest in their skills and education, enter the workforce, move into higher status and better paying professions, as well as make more money overall. The pill now made it possible for women to separate their sexuality and childbearing. This was a major turning point in the sexual revolution, as well as a more common topic of conversation. Even though contraception was available, it didn't necessarily mean it was easily accessible. Many state laws, similar to the Massachusetts law, only permitted physicians and pharmacists to distribute contraceptives. Laws like these significantly decreased access to contraceptives, especially among young women. By making contraception available to everyone, our culture has shifted in the way we discuss, learn about, and participate in sex. In our society today, we start learning about sex at a young age through sex education courses. We are comfortable and informed to talk freely about this subject because it has become part of our social lives. It is also discussed not just between friends, but also through media and in public. The sexual revolution has become the norm and has actually added another level, which is the hookup culture. We see this today in the media and on college campuses. However, sex without responsibility can be dangerous because participants may have frequent partners and little accountability. The future may bring this extreme freedom to a tipping point, and maybe even swing back to a more conservative outlook. In conclusion, the Supreme Court case Eisenstadt versus Baird changed history because it allowed, in addition to married people, single people the access to contraception. This case also made it legal for other vendors to give out contraception rather than just pharmacists and doctors. It has changed the way the Supreme Court looks at family law and has allowed women to enter the workforce. Overall, this case has improved and advanced women's reproductive rights.